All right, so welcome to episode 4 of the Inside Blitz podcast. Today, we are going to discuss why David has lost his mind, and we're going to go over our power rankings. And he's got a very interesting take on who is going to make the playoffs and who isn't. So we're going to get to that. First, we're going to start off by recapping week 5, which we just finished up in the CFSL. We'll go through them real quick. Starting off the week was Notre Dame and Auburn. That game was close early on. It was 14-14 at the half. And then the second half, Notre Dame kind of ran away with it, outscoring 24-7 in the second half. Ty White had a solid game with 3 touchdowns, was 15-20 passing. David Woods at 81 yards on the ground, didn't score a touchdown, one of the few weeks that he doesn't get in the end zone. Justin Philhart had a big game of defense, 9 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss, and a sack. Blake Moon, super efficient on offense, 23-26, 176, and a touchdown, 96 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. But it seemed like every pass that he threw was like 4 or 5 yards. They completed 50% of their third downs, but it was like their drives were so long that eventually they ran into a third down they couldn't convert, and especially in the second half. And kind of fell apart a little bit. Defensively, Nick Brummer, big game, 14 tackles, or the second highest of the week, actually. Quick take, your take on that game, David?
Blake Moon's late game heroics have kind of continued, and he's kind of having to do a lot of work late in games to kind of keep them in it. I mean, they were pretty close at halftime, and then the pull away from Notre Dame kind of started itself, and Blake Moon just kind of had to put the team on his back, and they got to figure out a way to not have to put him in those kind of positions to really be successful.
Maybe got to be a little bit more aggressive early on. They got to push the ball down the field. You know, Auburn's got those 2 5-star receivers out there, just not getting the ball a whole lot. Devontae Duncan only had 4 catches. Ethan Smoker only had 2. Like I said, it seems like they're throwing a lot of short passes. They got a freshman quarterback, probably plays into it a little bit, but we'll see how they adjust going along. The second game of the night was actually the best game of the weekend, or of the week. Actually, we're all during the week now. Tennessee upsets your Ohio State Buckeyes, which is going to play into why I think you're crazy later on in the show. So be sure to stay into that. But that game, Ohio State started out early, had a 13-6 lead at the half, and then Tennessee scores to tie it up. Goes into the fourth quarter, tie game. Tennessee jumps out, scores the first 14 points, takes a 14-point lead. Ohio State comes back, scores a touchdown, gets the ball back, has an opportunity to drive down the field and tie it up, but they weren't able to convert. Tennessee holds them off, gets the win. Mitchell Kennedy, big in the win, 27 carries, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyle Miller, 180 yards on 20 of 37 passes, so just a little over 50%. Same kind of issue that Blake Moon has, not throwing the ball downfield very well, and didn't have a great completion percentage. Just weren't able to get the offense going outside of Mitchell Kennedy, who was just dominant in that second half. Defensively, had some decent performances on defense. Terrence Mitchell had 7 tackles. Caleb Tuiasosopo had 6. Offensively, Jay Smith, 28-41, 268, a touch, a pick, but only 20 carries for 45 yards. Aries Lewis only carried the ball 5 times. Defensively, Marquise Mack was a standout, 15 tackles, which is a season high for any player, and a tackle for loss. So that's your team. What happened? How'd you screw up?
Well, you call it a screw up. It's just a great in-game adjustment, right? Ohio State was expecting Kyle Miller to throw the ball more, mainly because Mitchell Kennedy had very limited success and a very limited body of work kind of coming into it. Hadn't seen a lot of touches in the running game, and then they just kind of started feeding that draw play. They found the night Ohio State's defense at night just went with the draw, and it chewed up clock, pulled up about like 5 yards a carry on those draw plays, and that's really kind of what forced Jay Smith to have to pull out late game heroics. And as we saw, Blake Moon, he is not. So
he does not have the Blake Moon gene, at least not in that game. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Gage Bodine saying that David's sitting there in disgust. The first game of Thursday night was Hawaii and Florida State. That was one game that we were expecting to be a really good game. It was early on, as Ohio or Florida. Why do I always get confused? There's so much in my brain. I have a hard time getting going. Hawaii led 21-20 at the half. I go a little too fast sometimes. But then they outscored them 28-10 in the second half. Or actually, I'm sorry, 14-6 in the second half. I was looking at that wrong. They wound up with a 9-point lead. And Hawaii just kind of put the screws to him a little bit. Tubbagut's had a good game, 30 of 43, 269, 3 touchdowns. Didn't push the ball downfield a lot, but Tim Riggins, 21 carries, 116, 2 touchdowns. Derek Gray, 9 catches, had a touchdown. He continues to be the best receiver in the league. Offensively for Florida State, 28 of 40, 286, touch and a pick for Elias Gonzalez. Followed up his big game with 398 yards and 3 touchdowns the week before. Wasn't quite as good, but still pretty good overall. Michael Kovac, 23 of 108, 2 touchdowns. What happened in that one?
Well, the one thing is we kind of saw Hawaii kind of come back to themselves, right? They had that bad game against Iowa the week before, or they won by 3. Like they kind of held things off because of Tim Riggins. Tubbagut's didn't play his best game, and then he kind of comes out here, puts on a nice show, helps Hawaii to kind of pull ahead a little bit and kind of damper down Florida State a little bit on their path to success so far. So it was nice to kind of see Hawaii kind of get back to their natural state a little bit there.
That defense was really tough, and Hawaii didn't push the ball down the field, much like Ohio State, much like Auburn. Well, actually, much like Tennessee, although they wound up winning, which was weird because usually Hawaii takes more shots down. That game, they just didn't a whole lot, but they do hold on to win, establish supremacy, at least over Florida State in the battle of 3-1 teams. So they improved to 4-1. Last game of the week, if you guys missed it, didn't miss a lot. Boise and Iowa. Iowa drives down, scores on the first drive, goes up 7-0. Boise answers back, ties it up at 7, and then Justin Meese throws a pick on the second drive, and then things just the wheels come off. They go off the rails. Boise winds up winning 52-14. Adric Berry, 23 of 25, which I think is the most efficient game that we've had this year. 224 yards passing, no TDs, no interceptions. But 19 carries, 167, and 5 rushing touchdowns for Adric Berry. That was not a misprint, if any of you guys thought that on the Player of the Week voting. So a big game from Adric Berry. Joe Friedrich, 21 for 123 and 2 touchdowns. They combined for almost 300 yards again and just form a dominant 1-2 punch. Jason Neihart got in the action a little bit, 4 carries for 89 yards. And offensively for Iowa, 22 of 32, 197, and that 1 pick for Justin Meese. Again, having a hard time pushing it down the field with that trio of good receivers that they have. Devontae Earlycutt, 13 carries, 62 yards on touch. He continues to look good, just not getting the ball nearly enough. So kind of a crazy game. You definitely got away from Iowa. There's not a whole lot to talk about. Boise put up 528 yards of total offense. Anything you really comment on that one, David?
Well, you made the comment of, that 1 pick, and it was all kind of downhill from there, and Meese didn't really push a ball downfield. But we saw that early on, right? Like the running game got going, and then, Meese kind of found a little bit of a rhythm, took a couple shots, and then the pick happened, and then he shrank inside himself and just decided to, play dink and dunk for the rest of the night.
Hold on a second. Now he shrank inside himself. Last week, after the game, you were blaming the Iowa coaches, saying the Iowa coaches did not do what they were supposed to do, and they got too conservative, and now you're blaming it on Justin Meese. So which one is it?
No.
Which way are you going?
Well, because he shrank inside himself as a result of the coaching staff, right? Because they didn't have enough faith in him after 1 pick, right? 1 mistake, and they said, no, we don't trust you enough to let you push the ball downfield anymore. Just play it safe. Don't do too much.
So, okay, right, now it's the coaches. Now you're backtracking. Now it's the coaches. First thing he shrunk inside himself, and it was his fault. Now you're blaming it back. Pick one side of the argument,
goes both ways, right? Like there's enough blame to go around, right? I mean, they put up over 50 points. There's enough blame to go around on this Iowa team right now, right? They're 1-4. There's enough blame to go around.
Is it the coaching staff, or was it just Meese's fault?
I think it's got to be more coaching staff, because they got to figure something out to get these weapons going and get Meese into a comfortable rhythm.
So even Shane Masters tells you to make up your mind.
Well,
All right, we'll move on from that one. So, players of the week. Obviously, it's not hard to tell. I should have just kept that screen up. Adric Berry, runaway. I think that was the biggest landslide vote in Players of the Week. Adric Berry wins for the 2nd time this year. Now, this is what's interesting. We'll recap his stats again. 23, 25, 224 passing. No touchdowns, no interceptions through the air. 19 carries, 167, and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Adric Berry wins his 2nd Offensive Player of the Week. Now, this is what's interesting. Jay Smith wins in week 1 and then repeats in week 4. Adric Berry wins in week 2 and repeats in week 5. Will Elliot Tubaguts, who won in week 3, repeat in week 6?
It's possible.
Playing at Auburn.
With the lack of corners that Auburn has, if I'm Tubaguts, I'm looking at that and I'm preparing a big feast in my honor to say, give me the Player of the Week candidacy.
I don't think
right?
he needs a reason to feast. I think he finds those reasons pretty easily.
I don't think an excuse every now and then to have extra added into that feast hurts him.
Far be it from Clutch to show up in the chat and question anything that's ever been done. But hey, somebody picked number 2 in the league. I don't know who that was. That person's been fired. He's not here anymore. So we won't ever see that guy again. He was obviously sleep deprived and drunk on Mountain Dew. So Iowa definitely disproved us. Picking Ohio State number 3, and then Ohio State loses to Tennessee, who had a win at that point. Yeah, I don't know. But Gage Bodine's talking noise in the chat saying that all he knows is that people got to figure out a way to cover him because of their new game plan. He's going crazy. And he might not be wrong there. He's had a couple of big weeks, so we'll see if he can keep it up. Defensive Player of the Week was Justin Philhart of Notre Dame, which he was actually in the running with his teammate Devontae Griffin, who had 8 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss. We thought they might split votes, which might open up a spot for Marquise Mack, who had 15 tackles and a tackle for a loss. But Philhart actually ran away with that with like 2/3 of the vote. So Philhart is our Defensive Player of the Week. That's the first Player of the Week on either side of the ball for Notre Dame this year. 9 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. So Philhart with a big week there. Anything to say about that, David?
No, nothing to add to that. Let's get to what we really want to talk about. Let's get to the real meat of this discussion.
Get into the meat and the potatoes. All right, so as Clutch so eloquently pointed out in chat, because he never misses an opportunity to point out when I'm wrong, I somehow picked Iowa, and one of the biggest regrets of my sports gaming life, picked Iowa as number 2. I looked at the stats. I had solid basis for that. David looked at this too and agreed with me, although I'm sure he will not admit it this week. But he sat up there with me. He's like, yeah, you're right. Like, this is made. Like, it's crazy. Hawaii and Iowa, they're the same team. We both thought that. It was late. We were obviously, sleep deprived and not thinking straight. But rehashed power rankings this week. So we're going to get into this. Is going to be interesting. Hawaii, I think we're all pretty much in agreement. Hawaii's number 1. Boise State moves back into the rightful place at number 2. Number 3, the Florida State Seminoles. He cannot even contain his argument, which is coming up.
Just keep going.
Number 4 is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Number 5 is your Ohio State Buckeyes. Number 6 is a team that beat you and should probably be ahead of you. But the Tennessee Volunteers move up from 8 to number 6. The Auburn Tigers fall to number 7. And Iowa drops all the way from number 2 to number 8 after that disastrous week against Boise. Now, you agreed with me when we sat here and we came up with these power rankings. You're like, yeah, that looks good. That sounds good. But I'll let you explain to everybody what the but is.
Here's the thing. I agree with them for this week. Here's my bold prediction. Florida State is not making the playoffs.
You're crazy. So who's going to make the playoffs in front of Florida State?
All right. Probably between of the two teams, between Florida State and Ohio State probably has a better chance to make the playoffs.
Even though they're one game ahead and they have a game in hand still to play.
They do. I think Ohio State's going to sweep Florida State this year because keep in mind, Florida State has to play your number 2 team twice, who looks like they have found their winning rhythm once again, right? They got set back like Ohio State came out, caught them off guard, and now Boise State throws Iowa off the rails, and they're going up against Florida State. And if I'm Florida State, I look at this first matchup, I'm like, I'm a little concerned. If I'm Florida State, I don't worry as much about the first matchup as I do the second matchup, right? I'm more concerned about what happens the second time they play. Here's the thing, and here is the key to all of Florida State's success, okay? When Michael Kovac has more than 25 carries, Florida State wins.
Let's see, here are these stats. Okay, so we had this conversation, and I'm telling him that he's crazy. I'm like, all right, let's talk about this on the show. And while I'm setting up, doing pre-production, getting ready for the show, to bring the show to you guys, he's back in a corner trying to find stats that justify his argument.
Now, wait a minute. This is your job. You do this for your life's work. I have to come up with something amongst everything else I'm doing, especially with the Madden beta insanity that we have had, to be able to put something together to have an argument to stand upon, right?
Well, you were having a pretty good time. You were having a pretty easy time arguing this before you went looking for stats while I was occupied with other things.
Here's the thing: Ohio State can beat Notre Dame. They can, right? The odds are pretty good, right?
I think you said they were going to.
They probably will, right? I'd give them a 90% chance to beat Notre Dame.
Based on where is your statistical evidence that you uncovered while you were digging through? What has given you that?
I didn't dig for Ohio State and Notre Dame. I dug for reasons to keep Florida State out of the playoffs.
You better be careful which side of the aisle you're jumping on, because now you're saying that you got a 90% guarantee that you're gonna. And there's Notre Dame players in this chat right now.
Hey, let me AD my team and be a little inspiring, right? And say we have good odds, right? We have good odds.
Back it up. If you're gonna be part of the show, you're gonna have to make a claim like that. You're gonna have to back it up.
All right, Sam is replacing me on the show next week anyway. So if the public decides that Sam is better at this than I am, then we can keep Sam on the show.
Oh, are you trying to resign now?
I'll step off, right? All right, that's fine. Ohio State will play Auburn. There's no reason why Ohio State doesn't win that. Ohio State and Florida State rematch. Like I said, Ohio State beats Florida State twice.
Okay, hold on. I have my own stat. So what you didn't realize is I have my own stats to counter you. You thought you were gonna blindside me, and you were gonna have all these stats that you were putting together. Well, I was over here producing the show. However, I've got something for you. Okay, let's think back. Okay, week 1, your Ohio State team wins 31-3 over Florida State, and now you're cocky and you're confident. And you believe that your team is gonna hands down beat Florida State in the rematch. You're gonna sweep them 2-0. However, since that first game, Ohio State is 1-3, and Florida State is 3-1. So explain to me how this is clearly going to be a win for Ohio State.
Do you want me to get here's the thing though. I think Ohio State has a better run defense, and as I point out, Kovac is the key to Florida State's success. Like, right? He's really got rolling. Elias Gonzalez isn't good enough on his own to win you games.
Isn't he? Because didn't he just win a game last week on his own? 398 yards?
Okay, but what did Kovac do to contribute to that, right?
He didn't put up 400 yards.
How great Michael Kovac was.
He didn't put up 400 yards.
Kovac. We were heralding Michael Kovac. We said, oh, he's great, right? He's fantastic. 34 carries, almost, over 150 yards, right? It's just a balanced attack against Notre Dame. Here's the problem for Florida State, though. They got about 42 points to a Notre Dame team that has the least amount of star power on its offense in the league. And they gave up 42 points to them.
Yeah, but aren't they leading the league in offense?
They're also like the worst defense in the league, too. I mean, do you want me to give them
aren't
a medal?
They lead the league in offense, though?
They're also the worst defense. Do you want me to give them a medal for that?
I mean, you said that they only had 3 star players. They gave up 42 points to the number 1 offense in the league.
Yes. But that's a concern for Florida State. You should be concerned if you're Florida State because you have to play Boise twice.
That is a concern. That is a concern. And but okay, let's take a look at this.
It's by far better than Notre Dame.
Who's better than Notre Dame?
Boise's
I don't think. Yeah, nobody's questioned that. I just want to point to the chat where everybody that's commenting in the chat all think you're crazy.
They can think that. I'm firm on this belief that Florida State doesn't make the playoffs. If I'm wrong, and we can declare anarchy later. I just don't think Florida State can make the playoffs. The only way they make the playoffs, they have to split the series with Boise State.
No, they don't. They are one game ahead of Ohio State. They're one game ahead of Ohio State. Okay, if they go 2-2 and y'all go 2-2, they go because they're one game ahead in the standings. The only way that you guys can get in is if they lose both games to Boise and then you guys beat them for the second time this year, which, judging by recent history, is not going to be very easy. So they can still lose both games to Boise, which I'm not convinced that they're going to, but they could. And then if they beat you guys, or they could lose to you guys. If they split with Boise and lose to you guys for the second time, they can still go because they've been better over the last 4 games than you guys have.
It's possible. Here's the only thing, though. You are holding, especially this Tennessee win over Ohio State, especially hard against Ohio State.
They were 0-4.
But they were the best 0-4 team in the history of 0-4 teams.
So
they are the best 0-4 team in the history of 0-4 teams. Let's go back.
That's like being the smartest kid on the short bus.
Possibly, maybe. Right? Boise beat Tennessee by 3. Okay. This Florida State team that you are hot on, they beat Tennessee by 2. Okay. Fast forward, Notre Dame beats Tennessee by 3 in a game that you and I both agreed Tennessee should have won.
They should have beat Notre Dame, yes.
Yeah, the ball bounced against them a couple times. It didn't go their way. Now, Auburn got lucky. The late game heroics of Blake Moon outsmarted and beat Tennessee's defense. Again, there were a couple of things there you and I said Tennessee really should have won that game. And then they finally get the ship right. Everything kind of goes their way to beat Ohio State, in part because Mitchell Kennedy got rolling really well.
Is this part of your excuse as why Ohio State lost?
What's that?
Is this part of your excuse as to why Ohio State lost?
Oh, well, hold on. I don't get
Florida State didn't lose to Tennessee.
No, they didn't. They won by 2. Do you want me to give them a medal for that?
Do you want a medal for losing to a team? That's what it sounds like.
I would have nothing to say here if Tennessee rolled Ohio State. I'd have nothing on this. Tennessee won by 7, right? Now, granted, Ohio State had to work their way back into that, but it was a close game, right? We looked at the stats. There wasn't too much of a separation between.
Hold on, let me stop you real quick. Are we both in agreement that Iowa is the worst team in the league right now?
They are.
And what happened when Iowa played Ohio State?
That's true. However, keep in mind, if Auburn is just above, right, what has Auburn done?
What does that have to do with Ohio State?
Well, we'll find out when Ohio State plays Auburn, right?
I don't know where you're going with your argument here. I feel like you just circled your way into a can, and now you're trying to punch out, and you don't know really which way is up.
This is why I need to prep my argument, okay? This is why I have to prep.
All right, so we're declaring me the winner. Is that what we're saying?
I don't think we declared anything yet. I think the jury stopped. Right?
Judging by the chat, we are. Burns
we're leaving it to the masses, right?
I think somebody told you to have another beer. Burns said, "David, you're losing, or you're losing me." Okay, well, he said you're losing him. So you were so out there that even Burns, who's a computer science whiz, couldn't follow your train of thought. So if that makes you feel any better. Not really. He's speechless. He's speechless.
I feel like there's a jab embedded in there.
It was very subtle. It was a little rabbit punch. It was so you didn't even realize it until you felt it. And you're like, wait, what was
that? Rabbit punches are banned from this anyway. Come on, what happened to clean fighting here?
Who said they were banned?
Oh, okay.
So first you're trying to sabotage me by prepping ahead of time. Now you're trying to make up the rules of engagement after we've already started engaging.
It's your show here. I'm along for the ride.
It's as far as I can tell, you've got equal screen space with me.
Yeah, you're the one who gave it to me. Are you right now?
Burns wants me to fire you.
Well, Burns has already been fired. What say does he have in the matter?
Matt thought you had a stroke. People are worried about you. Maybe a debate format isn't the best thing for you.
Where's Sam? Sam's filling in for me next week. We'll see if it suits him better.
I don't know. I like Sam too much. I don't know if I want to debate Sam.
Okay. This is where we're going with this now. Playing favorites.
No, I'm just keeping you on your toes, and I'm just continuing to hit you with shots until you're completely down. I'm hitting you just enough just to keep you upright and going.
I am resigning from my color commentator spot today. Sam can fill in for me for the rest of the season. We'll all go from there.
You enjoy this too much to quit. Let's be honest.
I enjoy the punishment that you are meting out. Yes, you're absolutely right.
See, it's all part of the job, right?
Well, I don't know. Look, when you gave me the job, this was not in the job description, okay?
I didn't give you any job. I think this was your idea.
Oh, so now we're putting this on me.
David just doesn't really. Let's go back to talking about football. Maybe we get back on track. All right, so we had our debate. David clearly is crazy, and
Florida State's not making the playoffs. Just they're not.
All right, are we going to put a wager on this?
What are we wagering? Am I buying you a beer?
You're not even old enough to drink.
All right, that changes.
You can buy me a Pepsi.
Give me some slack here.
All right, so let's move on to next week's games because we have some interesting things to talk about. Now, the first game on the schedule, Iowa and Tennessee, 7:00 on Tuesday. This one is interesting because now Tennessee has momentum, and Iowa, after clearly being overrated last week, drops all the way down to number 8, the spot that Tennessee was in. Now Tennessee moves up to 6. Tennessee's got a little bit of momentum. Iowa still is a team without an identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they are. They've tried to run. They tried to run early against Auburn, and they looked pretty good in that game. And then Blake Moon happened. And then they really went pass heavy for the last several weeks. We haven't been able to figure out really how to make that work. And then they go back last week against Boise trying to do what Ohio State did, but they just aren't as good at it as Ohio State is. And they get completely rolled. So Tennessee's defense is really good. I personally can't see how Iowa winds up winning this one, unless it's a close game and Kyle Miller makes a mistake and throws a pick, and Joey Hansen or, somebody, Denzel Brock, Sean Woodsmall, Jerry James, one of them make a pick late in that game to shift it. I don't see how Iowa wins this one because that Tennessee defense, even though the stats may not show it, I still think it's the best defense in the league. How do you see that one shaping out? And you're wrong regardless of what you say.
Wait a minute. We'll come back to that later. Well, here's the interesting thing.
How about the one that wore a T-shirt that said "I'm never wrong"?
Well, all right. Well, hold on. That's a different story altogether. That's neither here nor there. Here's the interesting thing, though. We talked about this kind of prepping for it last week. Devontae Earlycutt had 13 carries, and I made the comment, and you agreed with me on this. That is the highest amount of work that Earlycutt has had in the running game all season long. That's the most carries he's had all season in terms of running the ball. I think if Iowa wants to beat Tennessee, they have to roll out a balanced attack. Now, will they do that? Can they do that? I don't know because I don't know anything about Iowa right now offensively. Defense, I know they're pretty good, but I also know that defense is not good enough to win them games. It's good enough to keep them from losing games, but it's not as good as a Tennessee defense or a Boise defense, right? I think offensively, they just got to figure something out and then just keep rolling with that.
How's it been trying? They've had 5 games to try to figure it out. They haven't figured it out. They haven't found their identity. Woodsmall had told me before, like I'm a riverboat gambler. I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna throw it, and then he comes out and he runs. So maybe he thought I was giving information to the boys. He ain't gonna throw him off. But
Well,
they completely changed what they were gonna do, and it did not work out for them. Tennessee is not going to be an easy team trying to flip it around. Iowa's at 1-4. Tennessee's at 1-4. I mean, the easy thing to say is whoever loses this game is clearly going to be at the bottom of the power rankings next week. Tennessee's got an opportunity here to kind of start creeping back towards a playoff spot. They're 2 games out of it now. I mean, they pretty much have to win out to get there, but if they win, they're in there. And depending upon how some of these other games play out, you never know.
That's the thing, though. They need some help. They're going to need help to make a playoff spot.
For sure. But, I mean, they're 2 games out. If Florida State's as bad as you think they are, then if they lose 3 in a row, then they're only a game behind Ohio State, who has to try to climb in. You think that they're going to take that spot, but Tennessee's only 1 back. And if I remember correctly, you guys have a game with Tennessee coming up. So if they play,
I don't have a game with Tennessee. I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Tennessee plays Hawaii, Boise, Notre Dame. Okay, maybe they don't. Just kidding. Wow. Okay, so 1 time tonight. David's been right. Good job. All right, so Tennessee and Iowa, going to be an interesting game. Iowa, they're kind of in the same boat. They could fight their way back into it, but I don't know that anybody thinks that they have the sustainability. Tennessee's got the defense that I think can get them back in there, but they're both teams' quarterbacks are kind of question marks. We'll have to see how it plays out. The second game on Tuesday night, Florida State against Boise. This one becomes very interesting. Boise wins, gets back into the number 2 spot at 4-1. Florida State loses, but in a competitive game, they drop to 3-2. You think that Boise is going to roll the wins? Okay, so this is what is also interesting. They're going to play in something that you almost never see unless the team plays at the end of the regular season and then the first week of the playoffs. You almost never see 2 football teams play back to back. But we're going to have that here coming up in week 6 and 7. Florida State at Boise, flip it around. Boise at Florida State next week. So, do they go all in with their game plan in week 1 and try to get the win, or do they leave something on the table for week 2? This is going to be a really interesting dynamic to watch.
Yeah. If I'm Florida State, here's the thing with Boise State. They found their rhythm again against a bad Iowa team. Let's put it in perspective a little bit. Now, it's a great win, and they bounce back very nicely. And they've caught fire once again, right? They've kind of found their rhythm. They kind of refound themselves a little bit. Florida State is probably, I think, the most balanced offense that they've played all season, right? They've got a little bit more firepower than a Notre Dame. They're a little bit more balanced than what they've seen from a Tennessee or an Ohio State. That's going to be the interesting thing, right? Does Florida State try and maintain a balanced attack both weeks, or do they lean a little heavily more one way over the other? Do they want to put it in Gonzalez's hands first? Do they want to give it to Kovac a little bit more? The one thing I'll say is this for Boise. You have a great secondary. It's very good, right? No question. They've got a lot of star power back there. They got to figure out a way to slow down the running game. They struggled against that a little bit with Ohio State. They've got to figure something to be able to slow down Kovac.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of interesting. The one thing I think you can prepare for both weeks is if they come out and they show you Kovac in week 1 and you're ready for it and you kind of see what that does and you can adjust to it, that makes things interesting. But it makes things a little bit easier going into week 2. If they come out and they kind of hide Kovac a little bit and they let Elias Gonzalez throw the ball around and then they unleash Kovac at home in the second game, that could be definitely something. So, and you also got to wonder, does Florida State come into this saying, hey, we got an opportunity to win both of these games. Let's go all in and try to win both of these games and then maybe make a mistake in the first week? Or did they say, hey, we've got this game at home. Let's not show them everything. Let's just see if we can play competitive, see what happens in Boise. And then the next week, really put our best game plan out there. It's an interesting dynamic.
It is. The one
By
thing
the way,
I'll say
Boz
is
says if you end the show now, you go out on top.
What's that?
Boz says that that's Chris Oley. If you end the show now, you go on top. Put all your head is what he's saying.
Well, here's the one thing. If I'm Florida State, this is not a knock on Florida State, right? This is a
Well, no,
tip
you've
of the
been knocking
cap
on
to
Florida
Boise.
State all night.
Well, I just don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I'm not saying they're a bad team.
There's
I
no
just
Ohio
don't.
State bias in that at all.
Well, maybe a smidge. Maybe a smidge. Okay, maybe a smidge. Here's the one thing: Boise State, I think, is too good for you to keep anything off the table. Me personally, I think you just got to say, look, we got to try and win both.
They could. I
Right?
mean, most teams are going to do that. We're going to try to, but somebody like you thinks they got an opportunity to lose both. I just think it's an interesting dynamic that possibly they go in and say, do we hold something back and try to keep it close, but not put everything out there and then go all in the second game with their best game plan? It's going to be interesting. They might not. They might go in all in on both games, but they could lose both. Or they could say, let's throw them off in week 1 and really bring our A game in the second game of week 7. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Moving on to Thursday night, we have your Ohio State team against Notre Dame. The team that you said early on in this broadcast, Ohio State's got a 90% chance to knock off Notre Dame. Far be it for me to point out that Notre Dame is 3-2 and Ohio State's 2-3, but a 90% chance on the road for Ohio State to beat Notre Dame. Tell me why.
There's something about losing that it makes you want to crawl back into it. Here's the one thing for Notre Dame. They've kind of really been relying on Ty White and David Woods. Ohio State has by far, statistically speaking, the best rushing defense. Now, we can debate whether or not they have the best overall defense, and you and I think would both agree that they don't. But they have a lot of star power in that front six, okay? The concern for Ohio State is if Ty White gets a rhythm through the air, Ohio State defensively is screwed because now you have to ask Jay Smith to play catch up. And as we saw last week against Tennessee, he can't do it. So I think for the keys to this, if Ohio State's going to be successful, they have to be the ones to get off to a hot start first and make Notre Dame play catch up with them. Because we saw that Notre Dame couldn't play that game with Boise. And if Ohio State can get out to a hot start like Boise did with Notre Dame, then Notre Dame's going to have to play catch up. And I just don't think they can do it.
I think it's premature to say that Jay Smith cannot lead you back because he almost did lead them back.
He almost did.
It didn't work out, but I mean, even Brett Favre, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, they don't always work out. I do want to say what's up to Noah 9 Boyti. I'm sorry if I say that wrong. New viewer out there, found us on Twitch. Hopefully, still checking us out. Feel free to go to collegesimleague.com and check out everything that we do. Go to FAQ, and it'll answer a lot of your questions. But I think it's going to be an interesting game. You make a good point that the front six of Ohio State is really good. And now, especially with Marquise Mack, the way you're utilizing him, he got 15 tackles last week. Being in that box, he's going to be a difference potentially against that read option attack when Notre Dame tries to run with David Woods and Ty White. So that's going to be interesting. It will be interesting if they keep him in the box and then they force Ty White to throw on that secondary that is very depleted, especially with Marquise Mack playing up in the box more. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I don't know. Gage Bodine could be the difference maker in that game. On the flip side of that is that Notre Dame's defense, even with 9-star players on their defense, has had a hard time shutting down anybody. And we saw Boise run for 400 yards in week 2 against that Notre Dame team. I'm not gonna argue. I'm gonna come flat out and say it that Jay Smith and Aries Lewis together, talent-wise, are better than Adric Berry and Joe Friedrich running the ball, running that option. Now they haven't proven it yet. Statistically, Berry and Friedrich are better, but talent-wise, there's no question that Aries Lewis and Jay Smith are better just from a talent perspective running the ball. Now they haven't been able to figure out the offense to have the success that Boise's had, but talent-wise, I think that's going to be interesting. And can Ohio State make the same kind of adjustments and play the same game plan against Notre Dame? It's going to be interesting to watch. Moving on to Thursday's games. Hawaii against Auburn is the kickoff game. Now, most people look at this and say, okay, Auburn's our number 7 team in the power rankings. They're 2-3, and Hawaii's number 1. They're 4-1. However, let's refresh your brains back to week 2 when Hawaii at home played Auburn and won by 12. They won 26-14. However, that was a game that the first drive of the game, Blake Moon rolls down the field with ease, runs the ball 5 times, passes it 3 times, sets him up inside the 5, and then gets injured and misses the rest of the game. They
Yeah.
wind up going on to lose. Chris Williams comes in their backup, but Chris Williams keeps them in that game. Hawaii cannot put away Auburn. What happens this week with a Blake Moon healthy for the whole game? Can Auburn shock the world and take out Hawaii?
Here's the thing. If I'm Auburn offensively, I go back to what I tried to do against Hawaii back then in week 2, because Hawaii didn't really get to see the full effectiveness of what Auburn was trying to do. Because as you said, Blake Moon goes down, the walk-on has to come out and try and take over from there, and he just couldn't do it, right? He doesn't have the same talent level. So I think offensively you have to roll with that. Defensively, you have to figure something out, right? Because Tubba Guts is going to want to take advantage of those corners, especially with Lucas Dykes and Ace McFreely out there at wide receiver. He's going to want to attack that. But Tim Riggins is not a slouch either. He's quietly had a couple of nice weeks, right? He's had a couple of nice 100-yard games, especially against that game against Iowa, where Tubba Guts didn't play his best, and Tim Riggins is really the reason they won that. So Auburn's going to have to figure something out defensively.
It's going to be interesting. Tony Bryan, I think you made a good point. Tim Riggins against Tony Bryan, I think, is my matchup of the game. Tony Bryant, 2 weeks ago, wins Defensive Player of the Week, has an amazing game, gets an interception in that game to really kind of turn it around, and wins Player of the Week. And then last week it disappears. He had 3 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, but was largely not a factor in that game. So what Tony Bryant shows up this week, and if Tony Bryant is playing like he did 2 weeks ago, Tim Riggins might finally get slowed down. He's been on a roll the last couple of weeks. But if Tony Bryant plays the way he's capable and Nick Brummer coming into the box and making plays, I mean, Nick Brummer had 14 tackles last week. It seems like he's always getting 10, 11, 12 tackles. If those 2 guys can slow down Riggins, and they can get enough pressure, you got Shane Masters on the outside. If he can get pressure on Tubba Guts, who he saw isn't the most mobile guy, could be interesting. I am scared about those corners out there, but with Brummer and Eric LeClaire, they play him back a little bit more. They can cover up for a little bit. I think it's an interesting matchup. It's one that if we judge just by week 2, or actually, yeah, it was week 2, Auburn stayed in that game. And Auburn looked like a team that we're like, okay, they can do something here. Blake Moon got injured. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Like Matt Pack says in the chat, anything is possible. But it's going to be interesting. I think that game was a lot more intriguing. It's one that Hawaii could overlook Auburn. And it's one that Auburn could really step up. I think it's very similar to Ohio State and Tennessee this week. Ohio State coming off a big win. Tennessee really starting to try to figure something out. They rose up and got the upset. I think this is a team that Hawaii could overlook, and Auburn could be right for an upset. I'm not going to predict one, but I think this game's going to be a lot more interesting than people might look at it on paper and give it credit for. Last game of the week.
No, that is the last game of the week.
Well, that is the last game.
You're jumping ahead.
Man, we already went through 4. I thought we had more. So that's the basic of it. So now this is the last part of the show. This is more for just the league guys in general, where if you guys are out there, if you have any questions for us, feel free to ask. We will try to get them, post them in Twitch. We'll get to them. The one thing I do want to touch on. So we saw in week 3 when Tennessee played Notre Dame, and there was some weird AI with Tennessee at the end of that game. We thought that could be related to, a young 4-star quarterback, Kyle Miller. Maybe that played a role in it. It was something a little bit weird. I've been doing tests for next week, and I told all of the ADs about this. I had the same thing happen in a test game where I use Arizona and Arizona State as my test teams. Arizona was winning 25-24. Arizona's got the ball. They drive down to about midfield. There's 15 seconds left. Arizona State's got 3 timeouts, and they let the clock run all the way down, and they go for a Hail Mary instead of using their timeouts and try to get in the field goal range, which could have won it. The reason I bring this up is I just want to point out to everybody that we're playing on a 5-year-old game that we can't change, and it's not perfect. between the league games and my test games, I've played 50 games. We've seen this happen twice. Okay. So it's, at that odds, 1 in 25, that's a 4% chance, right? So it's not likely that we're going to have this happen very often, but it could happen once or twice a season. And I just want to put it out there for the guys that are watching and the guys that see that, just understand, like, there are some weird things that can happen. And if it does happen to happen, don't freak out and be like, oh, we got screwed by the CPU. The CPU is not screwing you. It's just something that we all know that's a possibility. It's no different than if the CPU runs a bad play, throws an interception, tries to scramble, fumbles, and loses it. It's not ideal. It's not the way we look at it, but there's nothing we can do to change it. And so I just want to prep everybody. That's a possibility. 4% chance based on what we saw. So it's not highly likely, but I just want to throw it out there as an opportunity, an opportunity for something. Shane brings up a great point in the chat. Guts last week, I ran into about it the giggles. Guts goes for a handoff, or actually it was a play action, and he gets stuck in this play action animation and sits there for several seconds, not moving. And I tried to fight through it, try to be like, oh, Guts, he's really selling it. Can't figure out what he wants to do. And then I just lost it. I'm like, all right. There's some weird things that are just going to happen. Even David's remembering it now. He kept his composure better than I did. I just said, screw it. I got to deal with it. I'm going to let my bout of giggles go. He tried to compose himself. Now it's coming back to him. There are some weird things that happen. And sometimes some weird things are going to happen. It might cost you a game. We hope it won't. But we're just trying to let you guys know. It might. Something weird might happen occasionally. It's very small. 50 games, a 4% chance it might happen to your team. It's not a big chance, but if it does, you never know, right? We ran into it early on with the field goals. Iowa's got struck by that with field goals. Just random luck that wind has played a role, and just, I don't know what's going on. They poison their kicker before every game, I guess. I don't know. But just some weird stuff can happen, and we can't change it. There's nothing we can do. I've done all the tests. I've searched everything on the web. I've got it as good as I think we can get it. There's just going to be some random stuff. So I just want you guys to know that, be aware of it. If it happens, don't break your TVs. Don't scream at the league. We didn't do it. The game didn't seek you out. It's just occasionally that something like that might happen. If it happens, just want you to be aware that it's a possibility. So like, hey, man, we got the bad end of luck there, right? So just want to throw that out there. David, is there anything that you guys can feel on? Auburn's had a similar issue with field goals. Shane asked if there's any chance that Auburn's kicker can make a field goal. It's the same thing. Everybody outside of Boise and Florida State, who both have 3-star kickers, everybody else has got the same rated kicker. They're all the same. They're all walk-ons. They're all rated exactly the same. Every walk-on in every team at their position, all the running back walk-ons are rated the same. All the tight ends, offensive line, linebackers, kickers, punters, they're all at their position. They're all rated the same on every team. So you guys didn't lose, you guys didn't lose the short straw drawing and wind up with the worst kicker than everybody else. I can't explain it. I don't know why some teams' kickers seem to be worse than others. It is interesting. It adds some intrigue. Iowa's had bad luck. I think Auburn's had some bad luck. Not much we can do about it. Now, Shane says something that's kind of interesting. And that he'd rather have Blake Moon kick for us. Well, one of the things that we've been tossing around is the possibility of having two-way players, which we don't want to do a lot of. And we touched on this, I think, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. We don't want to have a lot of two-way players because that doesn't really simulate college football because there's not a lot of two-way players. However, we could do some interesting Jim Thorpe type things where maybe a kicker or a quarterback signs up to be a kicker, or maybe a kicker signs up to be a quarterback and they become the backup quarterback and the kicker, although that would kind of work out kind of strangely on field goal attempts. Do they hold for themselves? Do they throw it up and kick it in themselves? How does that work if they're holding and kicking? Because the backup quarterback usually is the holder. Anyway, we're thinking about stuff like that. We're looking at a lot of different options for season 2. We're adjusting things. We're trying to make things more transparent so guys can know what they're getting. They can have more options in creating the player that they want. Trying to make more differentiation between 3 stars and 5 stars, so the guys that are paying to be 5 stars feel like they're getting more from it and that the 3-stars aren't being just as good. I don't think we have a ton of those issues. I think a guy like Joe Southwick or Joe Friedrich fits into that category a little bit, but I think that's more scheme. Lorenzo Vasquez would be another person who's leading the league in sacks as a 3-star. I think he's got a good build based on how he built his character, but I think also watching that team, Devontae Griffin's clearly the better player and the more consistent player on a week-to-week basis. So I think a 5-star does matter, even though Lorenzo Vasquez has looked really good at times. So anyway, David, do you have anything to add or anything that you think we should bring up?
Nothing off the top of my head.
No, that's it. Nobody's got any questions in the chat. So hopefully, we actually, somewhere in our argument, in our debates, we brought in a new person who had never seen us. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. What is this? Now, they're not still here, so maybe they found out what we're doing and it's not their thing. But hey, apparently we got some stuff going. Did you guys like the debate, the back and forth? You guys tell us, what should be the focus of the Inside Blitz going forward? Should we recap last week's games, preview next week's games, do our power rankings, find one thing that David says that's off the wall and let me beat him up about it? Or what do you guys think? Like, will you guys tell us, what do you guys want us to do? What's going to be the most entertainment value for you guys?
I don't know, but Tim tells me you're getting the sweeter end out of this deal somewhere along the line.
What? Hold on. What? Do you say something about my rear end?
What? No. I think somewhere along the line in the way you want the show to go, I think you're getting the sweeter deal out of this because you get to beat up on my insanity.
Well, it's because it's insanity, and you say it like it's logical reason, and you don't have factual basis for it.
What's so crazy about saying that Florida State just won't make the playoffs?
Because they're 3-2 and Ohio State's 2-3.
That's a 1 win back. What? And in theory,
okay, Florida State's 3-1 in the last 4 weeks, and Ohio State's 1-3. Ohio State's got a great win over Boise. I'll give you guys that. But then you got 3 losses that are kind of make you shake your head.
It would be worse if I was saying that Tennessee was going to get in over Florida State, or Iowa for that matter. Tennessee has a great chance to get in over both of them if Florida State and Ohio State kind of screw up along the line, right? Tennessee, if they just went out.
What has Florida State done in the last 4 weeks to make you think that they're not a great team?
There's nothing about Florida State that makes me think they're not a great team. I just think that the competition that they have to face is going to step up and be a little bit better. Boise State, we know, is better. I think Ohio State.
How do we know? Boise State lost 59-17 to Ohio State, who is our number 5 ranked team, and we clearly know that Florida State is better.
Hawaii beat Iowa by 3. What does that do for them? They're your number 1.
I thought Iowa was our number 2 team because of that. Man, we obviously ended that segment way too quick. All right. Well, nobody's got any questions. Everybody feels like they're good. We appreciate everybody that's tuned in. If you guys are still here, I'm gonna give you a shout out. Pack, Shane, Tony. I believe that's Tony Bryant. Nick Brummer. I know I saw Gage Bodine. Let's see. Boz was Chris Oley, Mike Teow. Let's see. We had the new guy, Noah. Hopefully he followed and maybe will check us out later on. Burns was in the chat. Clutch was a little bit, just wanted to stop by and point out I was wrong last week. But hey, that's okay. If I can call out David being wrong 7 or 8 times every week, I can admit I'm wrong once. I mean, that's fair. I think that's fair.
I'm glad I'm not here next week for you to do this. Keep away from this.
We'll let Burns show you how to be a real broadcaster.
Okay, well he can step in for me for the debate stuff then.
I thought
he can write my debates for me. He can write my debates for me. I thought
you liked the debate though.
With him, I can debate with Sam all day. Have you seen our Discord chats?
Oh, so you're saying Sam doesn't have good, strong debates. You're more intimidated by my debate style.
No, I'm saying Sam might be better at it than I am, but I can debate with Sam all day. Does that make sense?
It still seems like you just verified what I just said. Pack, are you still here? Are you picking up what I'm putting down?
See chat, and by your reaction, I don't know that I want to.
Does anybody feel like David got a little flustered in this one? Matt agrees with me, but maybe debates are not the best for David.
I'll stick to the broadcasting. We can find somebody else to argue their head off with you.
You do a really good job of it when we're on the phone. You just don't like doing it when we have an audience that's voting.
I can't see what the audience is even voting, so I don't know why that matters.
Well, you could have pulled up the Twitch chat on your own and saw what they were saying.
I could have, but then it would have messed up with everything, and I didn't think do it ahead of time.
Okay. Well, you're off your game this week. We'll just write it up at that.
Oh, okay. Well, cut me some slack. It's all the Madden data stuff.
I was off my game last week. I picked Iowa number 2. I would say that was far worse than anything you did this week.
Now, don't try and make me feel better. Let's call it like it is.
I'm just being self-reflective and being honest.
That's what we're calling it. That's what we're calling it. Okay.
All right. That's going to wrap it up for this week. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you on Discord. We'll see you back here tomorrow night in 24 hours as Florida State, or actually Iowa and Tennessee kick off the night, followed by Florida State and Boise, where David says Boise is clearly better than Florida State, and Florida State has an opportunity to prove him wrong. We'll see you guys tomorrow.